Okay. Hello, I'm Kelsey Nabin. I am a lead social scientist at BlockScience, a complex systems engineering firm, as well as a PhD level researcher from RMIT University in Australia, conducting my postdoctorate with Blockchain Gov. I have a brief amount of time to share with you today on AI accountability in/and governance. And so what I'm really interested in here is, I guess, the rise of LLM GPT agents and how Web3 projects are incorporating those into governance and what the considerations are when projects do this. And so I'm not necessarily recommending this, but more as soon as I played with ChatGPT myself, I knew that this is a very likely direction that projects would go, and many are. So here's a bit of a journey of sort of research and some design work so far, and you'll notice that it ends in kind of a call to action. I'm really interested in working with relevant projects on this research, as well as in the design space. And so here's a brief sweep of some of the projects, including Autonomous, thank you for hosting this, that are starting to think about how to use LLMs in governance and decision-making contexts within their projects or communities or protocols. So MakerDAO is talking in the endgame plan about using AI agents to interpret their very lengthy and comprehensive kind of constitutional documents that they're developing. Algovera is around personalized agents, but I don't want to do them a disservice because I know they're probably listening here based from Twitter. Token Engineering Commons approved funding within their community to use LLM agents in token engineering design, and that's really being taken as an experiment to see how that can be done and what the considerations are, as well as Ceramic, Ocean Protocol, and others. And if there are others that aren't listed, I'm really happy to hear from you and include you in this sort of lay of the land. So first of all, what is accountability and why are we talking about it? Well, when there's decisions made, we want to know who's made them, how they've been made, and also to make adjustments when required. And so I've provided kind of my definition at the top here, and I'm really focusing on sort of building on Boven's, which is sort of a broadly accepted academic definition around the relationship between an actor and a forum. And so you can think about an AI agent as an actor, and a forum might be the community that it's acting upon, say in governance decisions, like Autonomous, for example. And so algorithmic accountability is when an AI agent can be questioned about its behavior, and then there can be a verdict by the forum that conducts the questioning, which can result in consequences for poor behavior or behavior that's not in line with the objectives of that broader forum in which it acts. So it's both a process and an outcome. It's about the outcomes of the decisions that are made, but also the processes of how they are made, and the ability to actually inquire of what those processes are. And so there's quite a few open questions that this raises when we're inserting, really expanding what we call the governance surface of, for example, feeding into snapshot votes. So how does one know where an AI is operating, or maybe the question is, how does someone know when a human is operating? Who controls it? Is it an individual? Is it an organization? Is it a broader community that's deploying agents on behalf of their interests and objectives? When is an AI agent an actor, and when could it be a forum as well? So what if you had forums of AI actors, and what if humans were the agents that were being held accountable to them? How can a forum question an AI? What are the consequences for bad behavior? So how do you enforce consequences on an AI if they have misbehaved? And so on. And so really, how I'm framing this is as a governance challenge. And this diagram was contributed to this research by Michael Zagam as part of our work at BlockScience together. And so what this does is try to frame AI agents as really subject to decision-making authorities. So they're deployed in a specific context, not by no one, not by magic, but by different forums that represent different stakeholder groups. So they can make specific decisions that have effects on the outside world, but really there's stakeholders that are deploying them that can be the focus of questioning consequences and enforcement. And so what this does is starts to map the sort of prevalence of AI agents against the people also participating in a system, the purpose of a community or a system, and the broader environment. And those ideas come out of a piece which is available on Medium called What Constitutes a Constitution, which talks about constitutive infrastructure and this idea that the rules of a system are not just embedded in one place, but actually across it, which can include the technical infrastructure. In this case, the constitution of the LLM itself is part of the kind of constitution of that system within a broader context. And so starting to place AI accountability in context, this diagram was developed by Jacob Hackel at BlockScience in conjunction with myself around looking at the composition of an actual agent in relation to a forum that deploys it, and starting to position some of those governance considerations, including internal monitoring, consequences and enforcement, as well as the constituting of an algorithm. And so we've been through this process at BlockScience with our own internal knowledge management system, GPT, or KMS GPT for short. And it involved asking those questions and actually setting policies around data management, data access, who has access to the GPT agent, what are the ethical considerations in terms of what data it's trained on, how it's tuned, and so on, the underlying model we used, and so on. And so this diagram is kind of nested of the previous, and it starts to include some of the other forums. So not only the LLM in context of the forum that maybe develops or deploys it, but also the forums in which it may act. So starting to think about really those feedback loops between external forums and then the forum that has access to the internal or that kind of governance and constitution of the LLM itself. And so possible design directions. I should mention I'm a social scientist and ethnographer by training, which is a sort of subset of anthropology, which is very helpful for looking at the outcomes, especially the kind of human outcomes or social kind of consequences of technology in this context. To take those insights and then transform them means to start to look at the design questions, which is more where BlockScience comes into the perspective. And so partly that governance design comes in at the constitutional level around shaping the objectives and constraints of an LLM itself. I've mentioned the constitutive infrastructure here. And then there's some other models that I'm exploring, such as the ethical regulator theorem by Ashby, which is about really aligning all regulation or all kind of rules and constituting below the purpose, which is another way of that people, purpose, and environment framing. And so based on this research so far, we start to surface some possible responses to some of those open questions that I've raised. So where does AI operate? Well, where an organization, an individual, or a community decides to have engineers build and deploy it. Who controls it? One forum through constituting the algorithm, monitoring, accountability, enforcement. What is the identity of an AI? It depends on the application, but needs to be considered. How can a forum question AI? Well, an internal forum controls the constitution, so an external forum can have that relationship of accountability, which is that, interplay or that back and forth sort of process of inquiring as to how an outcome was reached, to bring sort of greater accountability there. And then consequences. So unless we're talking about sort of future iterations that aren't here yet, if it's possible to identify who has deployed an agent, then it's potentially possible that a provider could be punished in some way. I'm really interested to see or to speak to people if they've got ideas about how that space could develop in terms of what mechanisms or levers. We think about punishment often in kind of like legalistic terms, but it could also be economic or sort of technical mechanisms there, as well as, of course, social norms. And so the further research agenda that pertains to this idea about AI accountability and accountability in context of private governance more broadly, which is my postdoc research, is around human coordination in surfacing the preferences. So how does that initial process of constituting actually happen amongst the geographically distributed or diverse group of people to determine the policies in the first place and on an ongoing basis? How do you ensure local level governance, so subsidiarity, that people close to where an agent is operating are actually able to monitor and sort of respond to those outcomes? And then, as I mentioned in the previous slide as well, what are the regulatory forces at play in these contexts? Are they legal, or are they also technical, economic, or based more on social norms? So what's actually effective consequences, and how can they be enforced in these contexts for accountability where these operate? And that might even be, to sort of situate this or ground this a little bit more for the potential audiences listening, that could be accountability to your own community. So if you hook up, Autonomous, which is the example I'm using today, you want to know that your own community can then hold the community to the governance decisions made and actions taken, especially if they're automatically enabled or whatever based on that through smart contracts. And so, as promised, this comes with a call for both field sites for further research. So I'd love to get in touch with anyone that is interested in talking and potentially doing participating in some interviews and having me sort of dig around and observe your work in a little more detail to flesh out my understanding of this space and contribute research to it. But then also people that want to more deeply and more formally explore the governance processes and the actual mechanism design here. And that could include the mechanism of that interplay, that back and forth of questioning between forums, actors, agents, and so on, or more about the actual regulation that ensues from that process. So true to time, thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me as part of this mini conference, and I hope to hear from some engaged people.